our report contains no dissents. We came to consensus of all of the key findings and recommendations of this report. We began our efforts 6 months ago with a trip down here to the Gulf. From the outset, we have committed to hearing from the many voices as possible, with a dedication to following the facts wherever they may lead. And we have a very broad range of issues that we had to address, and I think some people will take exception with various issues, but be mindful that we were doing our best. We had a responsibility to address as honestly and directly all of the issues, full range of issues that were in our charge. I mentioned the staff. We really want to take special recognition for this group of scientists, lawyers, engineers, policy analysts who were assembled to assist us. Some of them were loaned by federal agencies. Many of them took leaves of absences from their regular jobs or even quit their jobs in order to do this work. There was a tremendous excitement and enthusiasm about it. We have spent about 6 months conducting research, holding 5 additional hearings, as I said, and making these numerous trips, not only to the Gulf, but to Alaska, one of the other areas that's covered in our report, because it is the area where there's a very large potential for oil and gas development in a sensitive environment. And we wanted to gain this perspective and to put it into our report, and the report, as I said, we delivered yesterday to the President. And I have to say, he gave us a lot of time and attention, and he brought with him his cabinet-level leadership, not only the secretaries of 3 agencies, but Administrator Jackson from EPA, Administrator Luchenko from NOAA, his chief science advisor. It was very impressive, and we had an engaging discussion about our recommendations and how to put them into place. Our report, which was released yesterday, is available on the Oil Commission website. The Deepwater Horizon disaster did not have to happen. It was preventable and foreseeable. This fact alone makes the loss of the 11 lives, the serious injuries to others on the rig, and the ensuing damage and suffering created all the more tragic. That it did happen is a result of shared failure that was actually, in our view, years in the making. This has produced rich new finds of oil and gas, generating abundant revenue for private companies and for the federal treasury. I don't know if you realize, but our little MMS office here in Metairie is the #2 generator of income to the federal treasury after the Internal Revenue Service. Our investigation found significant errors and misjudgments by 3 major companies, BP, Halliburton, and Transocean, that led to this disaster. These errors and misjudgments, described in great detail in our Chief Counsel's presentation to the Commission in November, and also in this report, and following this, a special report of our Chief Counsel, range from failures to properly interpret warning signals and the results of key tests, to flaws in late-stage design decisions. Taken together, we have concluded that these mistakes amount most fundamentally not to a failing of technology or individual judgment, but a significant failure of management. It's important to emphasize these errors, mistakes, and management failures were not the product of a single company, but instead reveal both failures and inadequate safety procedures by several industry players who are leaders in global exploration and production, particularly in deepwater environments around the world. Our approach was flawed in a fundamental way. The same agency had two distinct and often competing missions. One, to maximize revenues to the government, which encouraged the rapid expansion of offshore leasing and drilling, while at the same time overseeing its safety. It was therefore quick to grant permits and slow to enforce regulations. Therefore, we recommend that Congress and the administration create an independent safety agency within the Department of the Interior with enforcement authority to oversee all aspects of offshore drilling safety. The American people should have complete confidence that those who are in charge of the safety of offshore drilling are not compromised in any way. We also recommend bringing our offshore drilling regulations to the 21st century. It is not just asking too much to expect our approach to be the most advanced in the world. And indeed, the rest of the world is looking at us, and we are, I think, in a time where we can move to global standards, high standards, that we will see employed in all the world's oceans as we develop these oil and gas resources. We need new, tougher standards, ones that at a minimum are at least as stringent as those found in other nations such as Norway and the United Kingdom. The fact that those nations are able to sustain a thriving oil production operations it counters any argument that effective regulation and a healthy oil and gas industry can't coexist. We have talked to many leaders in the industry, and we're convinced, based upon their perspectives, that this can coexist effectively and productively.
I think you really can put this report in the context of safety. Safety for the people working on the rigs and safety for the environment and the communities that are affected by it. That was the driver that we worked under, and I think we really concluded that major reforms were required, reforms on the part of the government specifically, but not only the Interior Department, but reforms on the part of industry itself. You will see in the report, and probably have already read, that we concluded that what we found was particular mistakes and management decisions made on that rig that day that caused the accident, but our conclusion really from looking into that in greater detail was that there was a systemic problem throughout industry. And just to talk about that for a minute, and if our chairman Riley was here, he would go into greater detail on that particular point, because by saying systemic, we're not saying that everyone is operating poorly. We understand there is a tremendous variation among the operators, that there are companies that operate to the highest standards and there are companies that don't. And what we are recommending is a system of, a new system, both in the Interior Department, but on behalf of industry itself, where every company and every operator and every contractor is held to the highest standards. And we think that is best achieved by creating this new safety authority in the Interior Department that would report independently to the Secretary, have an independent expert in engineering and energy who would be appointed by the Senate to do that, really separate, as Don mentioned, that operation from leasing decisions and from revenues. Also, one of the key areas which has been under discussion in Congress has not yet been acted on, but is to lift the liability cap. And the liability cap is now set at $75 million. That's woefully inadequate. We don't put a number on what it should be lifted to, but we state a significant increase, and that's something that we hope Congress will get to. The recommendations, when you read them, there are a whole series of recommendations that can be adopted by the administration, by the executive branch. We talked with the President yesterday about those. We're hoping that he and his cabinet officials will be interested in moving rapidly on those, in those areas where they have executive authority. There are others that require congressional action, and we hope that there will be leaders in Congress who will move rapidly as well, and I think the liability cap is one of those. The other area, which is of course significant to Interior, to NOAA, to the Coast Guard, to the other federal agencies that were involved in the spill and the response and are involved in overseeing the oil and gas industry, is having adequate resources to do the job. And as Don mentioned, not only has the Interior Department been kind of outmatched over the years of doing its job, it's just been seriously underfunded. So to take on the responsibility of stewardship and oversight that we see as their responsibility and one that the American public expects them to carry out, they need to be provided the resources to do that. One of the things that we recommend is that industry pay for that. In other industries, the communications industry, Federal Communications Commission, the nuclear industry, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, those agencies are paid for by fees out of those industries. We think that should happen here too. This is an enormously lucrative industry. It's one, as Don mentioned, second largest source of revenue to the federal government. We think that that would enable the Interior Department to have the resources adequate to do the job to ensure that these activities are operated in the safest way possible.
Our co-chair, Bill Riley, who was the administrator of EPA at the time of the Exxon Valdez spill, now that he's taken this task, was just amazed at the lack of advance in the technology. What we were doing to fight this spill in the Gulf of Mexico, we're using the same tools with the same diminished, limited effectiveness as we were doing Exxon Valdez. We have to improve and gain from that. In addition to that, we were totally unprepared. Not only BP, but any other company that would have had this accident happen was unprepared to contain a well blowing out in the deep Gulf of Mexico. But most importantly, and I think you're all aware of this, recommendations of the Governor Mavis to the President, as well as issues the Louisiana delegation is proposing, the dedication of the Clean Water Act penalties. These are penalties which are levied on the industry, on the responsible party, on a per barrel basis for the amount of oil spilled into the Gulf. And so once that's determined and the degree of negligence is determined, it could be a rather significant amount of money. So we are joining others in providing rationale for dedicating 80% of the Clean Water Act penalties to coastal ecosystem restoration, not to all the other things that people might want to do with the funds, but to coastal ecosystem restoration to help rebuild the resilience of this system. If we could use this tragedy, find it a silver lining, we could help move forward the long-term restoration of this great part of the United States. Thank you. We will take questions.
Does your report in any way recommend to the Coast Guard and the NOAA to quit using our money, because we pay them, our tax dollars, to hide information?
And in this report, there's a lot of criticism of our government, our federal government, state government, about their response. But in aggregate, I think it's our view that our government, it took them a while to get it right, but actually responded quite well. On the issue of dispersants, we certainly realize the very intense feelings about dispersants and recognize why intuitively putting a chemical on to treat another chemical doesn't make sense to a lot of people. But the decision about dispersant use is a choice between two bad choices. And in general, the government, through a lot of activities and caution, basically used that to make those decisions. And it's our judgment that the use of dispersants, particularly well offshore and in the deep water, actually reduced the amount of oil that reached the surface and reached shore. And so it was a judgment call. The jury is out in terms of its full assessment about the effect on the deep Gulf of Mexico, but as of now, it looks like it was the right call to make, to use the dispersants to minimize the onshore impact.
My name is Ricky Ott. I'm a survivor of the Exxon Valdez oil spill, and I just want to say this is all like deja vu. Okay, so four things actually, really quickly. The dispersant so-called trade-off, that is the oil industry's frame of the issue. The real question should be, how do we clean up oil spills the best way possible? Not trade-off environment, deep water, near shore, but how do we do it best? Norway has a completely different approach. They rely on mechanical, that's why they have heavy-duty skimmers, booms, and we didn't, because we rely on dispersants. So it's the wrong frame. Don't let the industry capture the frame. Second thing is, Norway specifically does not use dispersants near populated areas because of potential human health impacts. And I'm afraid we have a situation developing along the coast. I believe 4 to 5 million people were potentially exposed to dangerous levels of oil and dispersants. 4 to 5 million people. There are health effects all over. 9/11 is back in the news because the same federal agencies that said there wasn't a problem back then are now saying, oh, well, maybe. Well, we don't have to wait 10 years here. We have Exxon Valdez experience. People get sick. So what are we going to do now to triage for sick people? And what are we going to do epidemiology study-wise?
Ricky, thanks very much. I think one of your points, or made in several of your comments, I think is important. We went in I think, thinking, or maybe just assuming that we were operating at the highest standards. We found that we weren't. We found that, and your use of Norway, we looked at what goes on in the UK and Norway, it's different. We felt coming, and I think the report recommends, this is the United States, we should have the highest standards. We should be setting the standards. We're not. And I think that's a fundamental recommendation of the report. We ought to figure out how to do that and get at it.
As I read about the health impacts and the recommendations, they seem to be extremely vague. Being that me and my counterparts provided you and your researchers with tons of scientific data in relation to the illnesses, the health impacts on the residents and the workers, I really see no sense of urgency here. Is there a sense of urgency more than the mental health? I mean, the mental health people have arrived in my area, but that's not helping the people that don't have insurance and are unable to get medical care for the illnesses from breathing all this. So where is a sense of urgency on that?
We are, of course, we're not part of government, so we can't do these things for you. We did observe, however, the nature of the problem, in that there's been inadequate assessment of health effects, both mental and physical health effects, and that in future spills this needs to be rectified. And we also make the recommendations that we really need to fast forward these various epidemiological studies that are underway to better understand the risks that so many people are concerned about, not only people who are concerned about occupational exposure, the cleanup workers, but folks like yourself who would have to just do nothing other than living in the areas that were affected.
So what can we do as NGOs to help you facilitate that a little bit faster? I've got teams of doctors that want to come into our areas and help, but of course there's a matter of funding. So what can we do now? I can't wait 5 years. I can't wait 10 years. My own health is deteriorating to the point where I'm really getting frightened right now. So
Well, I think
what can we do?
I think the main thing is to go to elected officials. I mean, they're the ones who have the ability. We are making recommendations. They're not, we certainly heard what you said. We do have health recommendations. Certainly, health was not anticipated in the national response. That's what we looked at. And I think it's a very, very serious issue. We've heard from scores of people who have serious concerns. We are not in a position to actually make the implementation of these things, and that's what government's role is. So, I mean, I share your frustration in that, but I don't have an easy answer for you.
Okay, and do you realize that right now the guys that are still out there cleaning up don't have the right protective gear? They still don't have respirators. They still don't have the rest of the stuff. I get calls from them daily. They're sick. They're going to the doctor. They're incurring these huge bills. And, I mean, it's just the most hopeless, helpless situation, and nothing's being done.
I have to reiterate how important the medical issues are here. I asked for medical mobile units to be brought in the area to do medical monitoring and possibly head on these problems as they came about, and it didn't get done other than the New York Children's Health Fund, an independent nonprofit organization, bringing in the pediatric medical mobile unit, which we now have in Plaquemines Parish. So as you have put this report together, thank you so much, by the way. I'm totally impressed. It was not what I expected. I expected the worst thing to come out of you guys. I really did. So I'm completely, with everything else we've run into, you have to understand. So, but at any rate, I'm totally impressed, and I listened to you, Ms. Francis, over and over again on the internet talk, and I was really, really glad to be able to come here today to say that to you. One thing I think in the future that we do need to do is set up something like the All Pollution Act back in the 1990s with the medical end of it. I mean, we have to face this at some point in time, regardless how much they don't want to. The second thing I want to mention to you guys today is our brand. Of course, the wife of a local commercial fisherman, I'm very, very proud of what he does. We provide a food source for our country, and we've always prided ourselves in providing one of the best food sources on the globe. So our brand has been tainted in the public's view at this point to no end. I mean, for 3 months you see the oil gushing out in the Gulf. Of course, people do not have confidence in our brand. So I asked the EPA and the FDA to put together some type of device, some type of test, something that they can come out into the field. We only have a few docks open, and actually do some small sampling sporadically as the seafood comes in, or maybe at the production plants, somewhere to actually do some chemical testing, not a sniff test. Come on. A chemical test, so that we can put together some integrity back into our brand. And if we don't do that, then I just see our industry deteriorating more and more over the next few years. Another thing, the proper assessment has not been done on the total impact of this. Watching the Wildlife Department's assessment of the shrimp assessment, for instance, shrimp stock assessment every year. If we don't go in and do a 2.5, I've seen a 3 to 5 year thing that you mentioned on the assessment to see just what the damage is, we may end up like the Alaska Valdez people 4 years later, the heron come back and drop to the floor of the ocean. I mean, that's what we may be looking at. So until we need to see a proper assessment done on this.
Thank you. That's
And
a very important recommendation.
Thank you.
Yeah, two ways that I'm not impressed with this commission findings, and maybe you covered it in your document and just haven't spoken about it, is the confusion over just who is in charge, BP or the government, in terms of the cleanup. Many times we heard the Coast Guard speak as though they were speaking for BP and not the people, especially when it comes to the spraying of dispersant, which many people report on the Gulf Coast that it may still be occurring. The other issue is the health effects. When you say the trade-off, you're essentially saying that it's okay to trade off the health of the people for a convenient way. That's possible, you know, and we know that one company, Nowco, made a bundle of money off of the sale of Core Exit, and that the people on the board of directors of Nowco are people from industries that have a lot of power in this world, including Monsanto. So that's just not good enough for us. We demand better. The issue is ongoing. People are getting sick and dying. And frankly, we need some urgency, and we need a little bit of lobbying on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Just on your first point, we actually did spend a significant amount of time talking about the issue of it not being clear who was in charge, and there is a recommendation that a spill of national significance, that it's clear that the federal government is in charge, even though the responsible party has to carry it out. Thad Allen was actually the most eloquent on that point in our hearings, so I think there we did address it. And then I also appreciate your comments on the health issues. It's important.
My ethylbenzene levels are 2.5 times the 95th percentile, and there's a very good chance now that I won't get to see my grandbabies. Okay, now I know that Catfish might be a little upset, the people here are a little upset, but the deal is that you said as part of it that you were to improve the country's ability to respond to spills, and I am a part of the country. I am the ecosystem. I'm a part of the whole everything. And so what I'm asking you to do now, if possible, to amend that, because we have got to get some health care. I have seen small children with lesions all over their body. We are very, very ill. And dead is dead. So it really doesn't matter if the media comes back, I notice they're all gone, and they pay attention to us, or if the president hears us, or somebody finds the governor, he's on his book trail, or BP goes bankrupt, paying to help us out, or Feinberg goes home. Please take Feinberg home. He's paid 400. There's been 400 health claims. He's paid 50 of them. That's less than 10%. What that means is GCCF is not going to pick up our health. We were counting on you. We were counting on you to put that in the report. If the oil workers and the fishermen and the crabbers get to feed their babies and maybe have a good Christmas next year, or if we can stop the soil from slipping into the sea, thank you for that. Or if you give billions to the BOEMR, dead is dead. It's dead. You understand? So I'm asking you today, yesterday my friend asked Feinberg to come and talk to us about health care. And I know your job's probably already done, but I'd like to hire you if you don't mind. And God knows I can't pay enough. But I need your heart, and I need your voice, and I need you to come to that table. And I need you to insist that Feinberg and anybody else that needs to be in on that conversation comes too. And I'm asking you that today. And I would like you to say yes to me today. Why are you looking at me anyhow? Please say yes, you'll come to my table.
Yes. And I think also, I mean, these health issues, I pledge that we will take those back and tell the White House, because...
Thank you.
Good
job. That's right.
God bless you.
was very powerful, and I think, we're hearing what you're saying, I promise you.
Our report is done, but our job is not over. And we will take these comments earnestly and bring them to the rest of the commission and make the people we report to in the government, and we're also going to be testifying to Congress. We'll make these points available to them as we go forth and try to recover from this tragedy.
Of a single company, but instead revealed both failures and inadequate safety procedures by several industry players who are leaders in global exploration and production, particularly deepwater environments around the world. Our approach was flawed in a fundamental way. The same agency had two distinct and often competing missions. One, to maximize revenues to the government, which encouraged the rapid expansion of offshore leasing and drilling, while at the same time overseeing its safety. It was therefore quick to grant permits and slow to enforce regulations. Therefore, we recommend that Congress and the administration create an independent safety agency within the Department of the Interior with enforcement authority to oversee all aspects of offshore drilling safety. The American people should have complete confidence that those who are in charge of the safety took leaves of absences from their regular jobs or even quit their jobs in order to do this work. There was a tremendous excitement and enthusiasm about it. We have spent about 6 months conducting research, holding 5 additional hearings, as I said, and making these numerous trips, not only to the Gulf, but to Alaska, one of the other areas that's covered in our report, because it is the area where there's a very large potential for oil and gas development in a sensitive environment. And we wanted to gain this perspective and to put it into our report, and the report, as I said, we delivered yesterday to the President. And I have to say, he gave us a lot of time and attention, and he brought with him his cabinet-level leadership, not only the secretaries of 3 agencies, but Administrator Jackson from EPA, Administrator Luchenko from NOAA, his chief science advisor. It was a generator of income to the federal treasury after the Internal Revenue Service. Our investigation found significant errors and misjudgments by 3 major companies, BP, Halliburton, and Transocean, that led to this disaster. These errors and misjudgments, described in great detail in our Chief Counsel's presentation to the Commission in November, and also in this report, and following this, a special report of our Chief Counsel, range from failures to properly interpret warning signals and the results of key tests, to flaws in late-stage design decisions. Taken together, we have concluded that these mistakes amount, most fundamentally, not to a failing of technology or individual judgment, but a significant failure of management. It's important to emphasize these errors, mistakes, and management failures were not the product. Our report contains no dissents. We came to consensus of all of the key findings and recommendations of this report. We began our efforts 6 months ago with a trip down here to the Gulf. From the outset, we have committed to hearing from the many voices as possible, with a dedication to following the facts wherever they may lead. And we have a very broad range of issues that we had to address, and I think some people will take exception with various issues, but be mindful that we were doing our best. We had a responsibility to address as honestly and directly all of the issues, full range of issues that were in our charge. I mentioned the staff. We really want to take special recognition for this group of scientists, lawyers, engineers, policy analysts who were assembled to assist us. Some of them were loaned by federal agencies, many of them very impressive, and we had an engaging discussion about our recommendations and how to put them into place. Our report, which was released yesterday, is available on the Oil Commission website. The Deepwater Horizon disaster did not have to happen. It was preventable and foreseeable. This fact alone makes the loss of the 11 lives, the serious injuries to others on the rig, and the ensuing damage and suffering created all the more tragic. That it did happen is a result of shared failure that was actually, in our view, years in the making. This has produced rich new finds of oil and gas, generating abundant revenue for private companies and for the federal treasury. I don't know if you realize, but our little MMS office here in Metairie is the #2